Warning: the podcast you are about to listen to discusses films on the basis of the craft of screenwriting. It contains spoilers. Films discussed may also contain offensive content.
In this episode, we'll be discussing Mulan, released in 1998, and Tremors, released in 1990.
Welcome to episode 6.
And today, in our, continued journey of different recording locations, we are now in our own separate homes. Currently, Jason's done the amazing thing of recording in a different time zone.
That's right. It's been a bit of a time gap from our last episode, even though these will theoretically be releasing every week or 2 weeks, whatever we kind of decide. I have made the move back to Calgary, my home city. Yeah, currently in my basement, and David is in his thoroughly decked out...
I like to call it my office, but it is my bedroom.
It is, for an animation writer, that you couldn't ask for a better office. The walls are literally plastered with every square inch covered with posters and knickknacks, and I think I even saw a Spider-Man figurine in the original packaging.
Oh yeah, no, that was a Christmas gift. I don't think that's a legit. I think that's a replica, a reprint, or whatever you call it. But yeah, no, my dad found it at a dollar store and thought, yeah, might as well give it to him.
Oh, so it's not Spider-Man, it's like Spider-Guy or...
No, that is straight Spider-Man. It's just it looks like it's from the 1970s, but like it's definitely like made in like the 20s.
But it's branded? Do you think it's licensed?
Well, it does say Marvel on it, so
Well, depending on where it was manufactured, you never know. Sometimes they change the spelling. Is it Marvle?
it's actually spelled backwards. Actually, it's backwards and upside down. It's a W instead of an M. But you went back all the way to Calgary, and like you drove.
Yeah,
So what is it?
yeah.
That's
Actually,
like,
I drove twice.
yeah, you took the motorcycle because fun fact of the podcast today, Jason is a motorcycle rider, therefore being one of the coolest people you'll see on the road.
I'm a pretty safe driver, so which is, I mean, cool. You need to be safe.
Oh yeah, everyone remember, helmets make you the coolest looking person on a bicycle.
I had my motorcycle out in BC when I was going to school, as well as my car. So I had to drive those each out separately, and then of course drive them each back separately. And it was great. I went through Washington State, beautiful scenery in the Cascade region there, North Washington. It was a great trip.
You went through Washington to get back to Calgary.
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to make the motorcycle trip out of going from BC to Alberta, might as well go the most scenic route you can. I mean, it's pretty scenic going the number one highway. I mean, I'd recommend that too, going through the Canadian Rockies. But I had done that a number of times, so I wanted to go to a route that I hadn't gone to yet.
And I mean, driving a motorcycle through like a national park seems like a really fun thing.
So, you come here for writing experience, and you're also getting some life experience. What a podcast.
I feel so. I feel like as a writer or any individual has to work like at their home most of the time. But speaking about filmmaking, did you want to talk about your film that you're doing?
I've been busy with making a short film.
Which is the fun part of filmmaking. School has been just one class. I don't know if I told you this already or like on a previous podcast, but I'm only in college right now until December to finish my Associate of Arts in Creative Writing degree, which I actually started before I went to VFS. And the only reason I'm still there is because I was just missing one science credit. Because to be an artist, I need to know how to do chemistry, I suppose. Actually, funnily enough, it's not chemistry I'm taking. I'm actually taking environmentalism, which is an art science, and I only took it because the animated series that I'm working on deals a very, very lot with animals, and it deals a lot with the continent of Antarctica. And although it's not going to be a show that's like fully like environmentalism, I kind of like shows that do science correct. Like The Simpsons, like also like does science correct most of the time, right? So I just like it when, writers kind of put in like that extra bit of like research. The way I see it, it's just nerding out in a fun way. Of course, it's still gonna be funny and stuff like that. But if I can just say like, hey, ice melts at this rate, at this speed, and just have that within like a 22-minute episode, why not? But yeah, school's been going steady. School's been going fine, but it is still school, so it's just got a
Yeah.
lot of work to do. Work has actually been a little bit more interesting. I did say I got my job recently at Indigo at a very recent podcast we did. That's been pretty fun, I think. I met a customer who came up to my till and dropped off just a whole bunch of magazines about motorcycles. And I immediately thought about you because I was looking at them and you had like a mixture of both Harley Davidson and also Yamaha. And I asked him, like, first of all, did you ride? And he's like, yeah. And he was an older gentleman as well, so he was very, very happy I asked him that. And then I just asked him, like, straight up, like, what do you like more, Harley Davidson's or Yamaha? And he, like, 100% stared me dead in the face, leaned over the counter and said, there's no other better bike to ride than a Harley Davidson. So, yeah.
Well, it's kind of surprising that he even had Yamaha because that's the whole thing with Harley riders is that that's the only thing.
Yeah.
I do have a Harley, and my dad rides a Harley, and I'm not like it's not my biggest hobby or anything, but I can tell you that the Harley rides way better than any other bike I've ridden.
Well, there you go. So,
So does Indigo take books from people now? Like, why did he bring them in?
oh, no, I mean, he got them from, the store and then brought up to the counter to
Oh,
check it
okay,
out.
okay. He was
Yeah,
purchasing
yeah,
them.
yeah.
Okay, I see.
But actually, this is another funny thing. At Indigo, a lot of like local authors, like small times and also like, kind of notable names, also come in to ask if they can like stock their books. I actually like I only hear like over my radio like, oh, guy has come back in to, push his book onto us again. And then the manager's like, okay, fine, I'll deal with it. But like it's actually kind of interesting, like because we do stock like very local authors, but I think it's only done through like our publishing company. It has to be through like upper management. But
Right.
it's kind of cool to see, the hustle going on. 'Cause I do see like these local authors, working at like conventions or even flea markets trying to sell their books. And like, if I had the money and I've actually liked reading, maybe I would have bought your book. But
Yeah,
yeah,
you know
it's
what?
cool.
It is cool to see the hustle because you got
Yeah,
to do it.
gotta do it.
There's something to be said for being creative and getting something made, but then that's only half the battle. Then you've got to actually somehow get it in front of people's eyes. I can't imagine that would ever work to bring a book to Indigo and have them actually just take it that day and set it up on a display. But hey, credit for trying.
Yeah, again, I admire the hustle. But like on the flip side of the hustle, like, we do get the people in there who tries to, game the system a bit with, a return system and all that. Apparently we have like a couple like a rolling carousel of like regular faces to come in to try doing things. And
Like
I only
buying
get
a
the
book
store.
and then returning them.
No, not even that. Like apparently there's one guy who came in with because Indigo doesn't just sell like books, we also sell like a department store worth of items. So we sell like toys and candles and like homeware.
Right, right, right.
This person comes in sometimes with like an American doll, which is, if for those who don't know, it's about a short, I'd say yay high, but you can't see where my hand is, but 3 foot, maybe 2 foot, smaller, about a golden retriever size, let's say. It's a doll of a small child, and she comes in without the box, and she just tries returning it without a receipt. Because I'm like still relatively new, I'm training with a whole bunch of new faces as well. I regularly get like the new trainees come in and just sort of be like, someone's coming with an American doll without a receipt or a box. And like, oh yeah, we know who that is. That's American Girl guy, and he's just trying to ship his old American Girl for a new one. Which I mean, again, good on him for trying because apparently he's done it enough times to get the name. At what point, like, I kind of like wonder, like, are you aiming a little too low to just trade, one American Girl doll for another American Girl doll? It's
Yeah, yeah, that's a good question.
the indomitable spirit of man keeping you persistent in all your efforts, I guess. Even though I'm still quite a very introverted person. Like I'm a lot better now. Like if you're talking like 5 years ago, this podcast wouldn't even have been a thing. I would not have gotten like the actual cojones to put my voice on the internet. Walking around and like talking to customers is still something that I'm kind of out of depth for. So it's a little awkward. It takes me like a little bit of like motivation to get in there, but like hey, how you doing? You need help?
Good job. Good on you for actually doing it. Where would life be without like facing down our challenges? Like that's how we grow.
That kind of legitimately because a lot of the people I talk to are very short. I guess the only hurdle I'm still going over, just because I'm still new, is just figuring out where everything in our story is. And even though like my branch is kind of big, it's not the biggest. Everything's like in a very like designated spot, like organized kind of like by the same ish stories they're written about. Like the fiction, fantasy, and romance are in the same section. And like graphic novels, comic books, and like kids' books are in the same section as well. But it's
Hmm.
like when people ask me for a very, very specific item, like I don't know, the beginner's guide to growing evergreen trees, I would have to like give you like a second to figure out where that is.
It would take a long time to know the entire store. That makes
But
sense.
yeah, but it turns out like I talked to some of my other employees and they know off the top of their head. I'll be like, hey, do you know where we can find, baby's guide to advanced mathematics? And they're like, yeah, no, it's just gonna be over there.
That's what you want. You want to be able to rattle those off. The babies need their math books, so
Segueing it back, as a writer, I don't think a bookstore is a better place to spend like a part-time working at because I actually get to nerd out a little bit on stories.
yeah, there you
Yeah.
go. And I was going to bring it back by saying growth, the experience of life, going through difficulties grows us as people. That's what we put our characters through in the things we write. If there were no challenges, it would be a pretty boring story.
Speaking about challenges,
Yeah.
Mulan faced, I would think, the greatest challenge in any Disney film.
Yeah,
And
that was a challenge and a half. A whole army coming at your civilization.
real quick though, because I do know that you told me that you've watched quite a few of the Disney films. Mulan just happened to be one of the ones that kind of fell off your list a bit.
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
gotta ask, how does this one compare to the rest of the Disney films you've seen?
Doing the exchange of kind of live action on my end, animation on your end. I've definitely have a history with animation. I've enjoyed it throughout the years. Definitely grew up on Disney movies. Huge fan of. I'm a Little Mermaid guy, which sounds an odd thing to say, but that was always my favorite. My sister and I watched that like every day after school when we got that VHS tape for like weeks. Never got old. Um, and then, of course, those were the golden years of classic Disney animation before the CGI years and all that. So, Little Mermaid, Lion King, Beauty and the Beast, and I think this one fits right in that golden era. Like it just felt like going back to that era, watching that, and it fit right in. I will say that I don't think the writing was quite as good, writing wise, for the characters, and this, like it's a great story, awesome story, Mulan. But I would say it didn't quite reach the peak of some of the others with the zippiness, the repartee, the dialogue. Like compare, for instance, I know that for Mulan, the comic relief was Eddie Murphy as Mushu, the dragon.
As well as the
I
other three soldiers as well for the comedy relief.
Yeah,
But yeah.
yeah, there was some comic relief there too. But I mean, when you get Eddie Murphy in, that you're kind of expecting it to be, or at least I was. I always knew that Eddie Murphy was in that one, and I thought, okay, that's going to be kind of where the main comic relief is, and it just didn't feel like it was there. Like compare it to Aladdin and Robin Williams as the genie.
Ah,
I felt like that was like a level higher. Um,
yeah, I mean, honestly, like when you say that, it almost feels like kind of unfair to compare like man to God. Like that's Robin
well,
Williams I'm talking about.
it is Robin Williams, but I mean, both him and Eddie Murphy were comedians in the '80s. They were both high name comedians. I would have similar expectations of them, maybe a bit more for Robin Williams, but I just feel if you compare those two, they're quite different. And there's got to be some amount where you're allowed to improvise and there's room to improvise, and sometimes maybe where you have to stay to the script. And I don't know how much. What I've heard was Robin Williams actually improvised a lot of that, that
Hmm.
actually made it into the movie. And I have no idea for Mulan, but it didn't feel like there was any improvisation for Mushu.
Yeah, I don't think so either. I'll have to look into that because I do like my Disney facts. But yeah, so you're thinking the writing kind of suffered because the comedy was a little bit subpar, and they were relying a lot of it. Because I do remember like Mulan does have like a lot of comedy beats in there.
There
Yeah.
are. I'm not saying there was no comedy in it. I guess comparatively, or like with what my expectations were, it didn't quite reach that level. But I mean, the story is great. The journey that you go on in Mulan is a lot of fun, and there are a lot of great set pieces and great devices that they use in the story. Like it doesn't get much more epic than how is this small band of soldiers going to get away from an entire Hun army with just a few cannons? And then there's the avalanche solution that Mulan figures out, which is awesome because, and going back to what we were talking before, it's actually realistic that an avalanche is a way that to take out a whole army. Now, I don't think they quite got the physics of avalanche dynamics quite right when the horse is like swimming around in a
Yeah, fair
and
enough. I mean, it does turn to ocean for a bit there. I
but
mean,
I was impressed when I saw that coming. Like, of course, watching it now, you can see it coming a little when she's grabbing the cannon and looking up at the mountaintop. And okay, and I just thought that's awesome. That's like that deserves to be in a movie. And an animated movie, obviously, I don't think it would work as well in anything else. It had other devices as well that I thought were well written, even.
so you did still like, Mulan's journey from, regular girl to warrior who proved herself more than what people expect her to be.
Oh yeah, the overall story was great. The journey for the character, sets her up as someone who she needs to bring honor to her family. That's the whole setup of what she kind of her goal is. But she's not kind of into the way that the her society is telling her that needs to happen. So she finds a different way to do that, and she succeeds in bringing honor to her family in a very different way.
And the thing you want more in this movie, writing wise, I'm guessing was just more of that.
No, on that front, I would say it was a success. So I guess it succeeds on that level for sure, and the story and the character levels. I'm just pointing out on the first thing that came to my mind that didn't kind of meet expectations. So the full review is that it succeeds in some areas, and in other areas it didn't for me.
For me, I actually thought that the live action version of it was functionally a lot worse than the animated one. When it took out like, the comedy characters and also like any of like the kind of like that character growth of like normal person to still like a normal person in a soldier's outfit, like proving that she could do it. Because yeah, the live action went super serious on the plot line and they went full fantasy with it.
Oh,
I don't
okay,
know.
and so
I kind
they didn't have any comedy whatsoever, pretty much.
they had like they didn't have the dragon, they didn't have Mushu. Um, the soldier characters were just regular humans. I would have to say like they didn't have like the same like three really solid personalities of uh yeah Chengpo, Ling, and Yao. So yeah, it was kind of just a functionally just a more boring movie. Because yeah, I think the one thing you can't really say about Disney is that it is boring. I think there's always something to see either visually or through comedy or even also through story most of the time. I think the other cool thing, because I think I want to talk about this later on in the podcast, is the concept of midpoints in movies. Because the reason I kind of recommend Mulan is because it has an extremely very definitive midpoint. Because half of this film features the classic Disney like musical songs, and the other half has none. If you've noticed that.
Yeah, you know what? I didn't notice as I was watching it, but now that you mention it, yeah, there was really only the songs in the first half.
Because
And I also felt the songs weren't quite as up to the level as some of the other Disney, like when you think of Lion
really?
and
See,
and Little
I have to
Mermaid.
tell you,
And this might just be my eyes. Like if I look back at Little Mermaid and Lion King, Beauty and the Beast, maybe I would think, okay, they are kind of all on par, but that's just the way it sat with me, with the exception of "I'll Make a Man Out of You," the that montage when they're training, which actually we watched in film school as an
yeah,
example of montage, and it is actually a really good execution of the training montage. It's right up there with Rocky, and the
yeah.
and the song is just super catchy too.
Actually, fun fact, real quick about that "Make a Man of You" song. Donny Osmond, who does the singing voice of Li Shang, the general dude. When he gets hit in the gut by like Mulan's stick, he actually does punch himself to get that actual sound effect off of his voice cutting out a little bit. And apparently he hurt himself too much that she bruised his stomach. I will say though, like, what about Reflection? Like Mulan's one song where she's like singing like to herself and like that kind of like her family shrine, I believe it's called. Like people usually go off to that one for like really, really powerful songs in Disney.
I'm trying to remember some of it, and part of also the issue here is that I've only watched it once, and sometimes you need to watch some of these more for like songs to kind of sink in. Yeah, it's not they were good songs.
Yeah, I guess I'm just biased because I've just listened to those songs like on repeat like multiple
Right,
times.
right.
But yeah,
That's like me with The Little Mermaid. I mean, I don't listen to it on repeat anymore. I don't
no,
want people to get the wrong impression.
no, no, you're a Disney fan. It's not bad to call yourself a Disney fan. You can go ahead and sing "Kiss the Girl" all the time you want. It's fine.
I probably could sing along because I had the cassette tape too of the soundtrack. There's sometimes more you discover on more watchings. We all have our favorites, but
But
some
yeah,
other things I liked was like she uses a fan at the end on the roof to battle the main antagonist with who has a sword, and she just lifts her fan, Chinese or Japanese fans, and the sword goes through it, and she closes it, and then twists the sword out of his hand with
yeah, that was
the
cool.
two ends of that fan. And I thought that was pretty epic. Like they had Jackie Chan consult on some of the.
Actually, Jackie Chan is actually technically part of this production. He did the Chinese cover for "Make a Man Out of You." Jackie Chan, he sung the Chinese Mandarin version of "I'll Make a Man Out of You"
Oh,
for the
okay. Oh,
I think it's
okay.
for the Chinese release, but also like as a promotional video. If you didn't know, Jackie Chan is a genuinely decent singer.
Yeah, no, I knew that he could sing, but I didn't. That's cool that he was involved.
But yeah, midpoints, like really quickly just back on that, because I think the one thing that I remember from VFS is just that was the coolest thing that I ever learned of knowing like not only is like the middle of a movie usually like, you know, the midpoint of a movie is usually in the middle of a movie, you can literally find like that genuine split of like the tone or the feel of it. Because like the one thing I remember is like half of this, you know, half this movie called like, you know, the fun and games. And the second half of it is like the bad guys close in. And it really is like I've started noticing that more when I watch films on repeat, like how like flip the coin usually is. And like I just went back to Mulan for that because I always thought like, oh, you know, when I learned about like that fun fact before I went to film school, I was like, oh, that's just a really cool thing they did. It's like, oh, it's just, you know, it gets serious like halfway through the movie. That's cool. But I now know it's an actual structural thing.
Yeah, yeah,
So
exactly.
so you can literally take Mulan and see like it's literally all very, very fun up until the halfway point where it's literally at the end of the song about girl worth fighting for, where it's literally just a bunch of soldiers having fun. You go from very, very lighthearted Disney feel to literally black, reds, fire, destroyed city. They have like the doll of a kid on the ground. Like it goes like full 180.
Yeah, and that was I was going to ask you what the scene was because that's often what you do is you use a scene as the midpoint. And so is it that scene where they come across the lost battle where
Yeah, 100%. Because this is like where Li Shang, like the general, like says, like, "Oh, my father, who is the commander, is dead. I gotta go become the new leader." All the soldiers realize, you know, war is real. Mulan realizes that, you know, she has to fight for her country even more. Not only is like a change in tone, but like in that very moment, like all those characters change at the same time, and it's just super cool to like just go back to the movies and find that. And like I find it now that it's just a cool thing to like find on a
Mhm.
rewatch. Because sometimes
Totally.
like you'll have like a movie that's like 2 hours long and it's like action, 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 action throughout the entire like second half of it. So it's like, oh, you know, this was pretty intense, but this is also pretty intense, but this was also pretty intense. But sometimes hard to find it. But like normally once you find that scene where it's like something really changes, like you can really feel it, that's probably it.
Yeah, and it's so true. And going to school and learning the structure of a film that it pretty much is a solid structure. Every movie uses generally, and you can, like you're saying, pick it out for every movie. Like if you look to see what the total time is of a movie and you're watching it, you can almost predicted to the minute, or find it there within, a minute or two. Very often it's that dialed in. And sometimes it's about the intensity, and sometimes it's I've had it put that it's a timer. For some movies, a timer gets added at the midpoint. I think there's a few different things that can happen to make that change in the story that you need to bring people through the last half, and one of them can be like a countdown that happens.
But yeah, it's just genuinely just fascinating. I think study just structure in film. I guess not even study, just like identify it. Because like I think the one thing like all the teachers at VFS were completely right on was that I'll never watch movies the same again. Because now like whenever I'm watching like, a movie, I'll always be like, yeah, no, that was the first act turn, that was the second act turn. That was the climax there. Like it's like, yeah, no, I get those beats now. And
Yeah,
it's honestly cool because now whenever I watch films, it doesn't feel like I'm wasting time. It feels like I'm just like just
you're
practicing my craft
continuing your
more.
education.
Yeah, I'm continuing my education, just making sure like everything they told me was completely right. But yeah,
And
but
I found that knowing that, yeah, for some people they say it kind of ruins, movies because now you're kind of anticipating this or like predicting it or whatever. But I find it hasn't wrecked movies for me because we want stories to have that structure. It's the most fulfilling kind of story when you have, an inciting incident right early at about the 10% part, and then you have a turn into the second act, and then you have your midpoint, and then you have a third act turning point, and you need those for different reasons as we've studied, and it just makes for way better stories than if you don't have those points.
I actually genuinely have a lot of fun predicting how movies are going to play out. Because like I'll watch like a scene like just before like something happens, be like that guy probably is going to reveal that he's the bad guy now, and he does. It's like yeah, called it. And it's always fun. It's always fun to just predict that. But going to my movie that you recommended me,
Yeah, Tremors. What did you
yeah,
think?
I actually was really surprised as to how good it was. I'm not gonna lie. I've seen scenes of it like kind of out of context because I just like watching like action scenes. So I've seen like the attack in the store. Like that was a
Hmm.
pretty cool scene to me. I was just really just impressed with how like not only how like American it was, and I mean like American as in without the A. This is a very American movie. Like the dynamic between Valentine and I believe Earl
Hmm.
was honestly just such a really like fun duo to
Duo.
watch.
Yeah, yeah. It was like a buddy movie.
It super was because I really liked. Again, this is going to be like go back to the concept of the midpoint as well as I like recount the story. But it starts off as these two guys wants to leave like this really like run down town where like there's very little people there. They want to leave it all behind. But then like once they encounter like the monster, they come back to save the people they essentially want to leave. And the midpoint of this movie, I'm going to jump ahead a little bit in the conversation. The midpoint of this movie really was a very fun game scene because it came directly after, I think, the most fun scene in this movie, which was the pole vaulting scene. Because
Hmm.
they legitimately were like they were laughing and stuff like that. The music went from like very like intense like horror music to very like light jaunty music.
Hmm.
And then directly after it was the attack in the store. We had death again, and it went from these guys trying to leave the town to we're only staying in this town. We're gonna try to figure out how to get out of here together. And
Yeah,
it
like
was
they were
super
trapped.
cool.
They realized they weren't going anywhere. They couldn't get out, and so now it's time to face down the enemy.
I think like here's my one pet peeve when it does come to like these movies because like going back to like oh predicting like the scene when it comes to the movies where it's like it's a horror movie, it's a monster movie, I always have to go to like the back of my mind, it's like who's going to die in this movie. And like you can always like kind of tell who's going to die based on one, if they're being like an actual like I'm gonna try to find a PG way of saying this, but not good person. Like if they're going out of their way to be not a good person, they're probably gonna die. If they're
Mhm.
like a background character with very minimal lines, they're also gonna die. And if they are like one of the main cast, there's like a 50-50 chance of them dying. Like I gotta say, like I kind of like I think the death that like hit me the most was just Walter Chang because
Oh
he
yeah,
was the only non-white person aside from the Mexican in this movie. And I'm like, ah man, you hit like you got rid of like 50% of your diversity with one scene.
yeah. And he was super nice.
He was super nice as well. Like, he was having a little bit of fun with it. He was he scammed the main cast out of $15 for the alien tongue thing. but like I don't think he deserved it, you know.
I think it's you can't be too predictable in movies. Like you need to surprise the audience sometimes with who lives and who dies. And
Because like here's the one thing I would say, like just in terms of like character building, all the characters that do die in this movie, I don't think had that much like character buildup. I think the shock value just came out of the fact like, oh, it was an old guy that died. Oh, it was a person that had like a wife that died. Oh, it was, this like lonely guy in his shack that died. So like all the characters that do like go out, if there wasn't really much buildup, so I didn't really feel anything aside from kind of like sad that they got rid of the Asian guy.
they yeah, and it kind of shows that there's always room to increase impact. Like, and how do we do that as writers? I think what they did do a good job of for this one was they situated you in this town. It was a small town. It had a small town feel where everyone kind of knew everyone. So anyone that does die, you know them. It's kind of like family in a sense.
Like I definitely got that small town feel of like all the people in there. But like the ones that did survive obviously had more time to build them up. And I honestly feel like if any of them did die at that last like climax bit, I would genuinely have been like very, very sad. But like spoiler alert, I'm actually really surprised nobody did die during the final battle with the alien slugs. But
Yeah,
yeah.
I guess they wanted to go for a happier success story
Yeah.
in
Because
this one.
I was really thinking that the guy who keeps shooting like the elephant gun was about to get it at some point, dude. Yeah, the
Uh,
guy with the basketball who was like being such like a nosy kid was definitely gonna get it at some point. But no, they all made it out.
and again, yeah, you can surprise the audience with
I
movies
guess
like this.
so.
Because
It
there are so many of them, right? So you need to be able to keep surprised. But this one, I mean, one of the reasons I like it is it has you'd have to call it a horror film, but it's so comedic. Like it's a comedy and horror, I would say.
Yeah, because like I will say, like the person who doesn't like horror, I was, as I was watching this movie with my phone, of course, I was holding it up in front of the screen a couple times just to block it and just listening to the audio. I'm like, okay, just for a second. But like once like it turned into like, this is what the monsters are again, like by that midpoint scene, I was like, oh, okay. I literally put my phone away. I'm like, okay, this is like straight up action now.
Yeah,
And I think the comedy and the action really drove it, and also the effects as well. I think this going back to the fact that this is like an older movie. I think I have to double check the date of it. Hopefully, the future me records the opening with the date, but everything was, I think, practical. Like
I
the
think so.
aliens were very
Yeah,
practical. They lifted up buildings very practically. Like they collapsed like a roof as well, like an extremely practical way.
yeah.
And like that's the one thing like as a person who likes animation, where it's like, oh, if you want to do this effect, it's gonna be like really, really dangerous to do it, so you might as well animate it. But there's like a really like cool feeling of just seeing a real thing happen to real people.
I think they had some really good puppetry and detailed miniature puppets of the sandworms. You know, rewatching it, there's maybe a few scenes where you can kind of tell it's kind of enlarged, but all in all, for the era it was made, yeah, really good practical effects. And the thing
The
that stood
only
out for me for that
oh,
one from a writing perspective is actually it was one of the movies that one of my teachers in a different writing class highlighted for me. I already enjoyed the movie, but he actually brought it up in class, and I was like, wow, this movie is actually being brought up in a writing class about screenplays, and then what he brought up was it demonstrates the principle of setup. So when the scene, which is a huge suspense scene, when the girl who's on her pogo stick is making sounds. These sandworms are attracted by sound, and so there's a scene where everyone's holed up in the building, and the girl who's oblivious to what's going on is out on the street with her pogo stick, making all the noise in the world. Right? They set up the pogo stick earlier in the movie. Like anything that you're going to bring in as a plot point, it's important to set up in the movie. You can't just bring something in to use as a device if you haven't put it in your world in some
mm.
way that, or at least that's the way that it best works for the audience to feel like a satisfying moment in a movie.
And honestly, like as just a writer, not only of films but also stories, I love setup because I love Chekhov's guns. Because I like having like innocuous things like fire off later in the story. And like this movie really did an amazing job of setting up every single thing you need. Not only did you had the bulldozer right at the beginning, you had the pogo stick, as you said. When we're in the supermarket, you had the like the
The
soda ice cooler thing that like keeps
yeah,
vibrating. Yeah, you had them driving past like the construction crew workers. You had the doctor.
yeah.
Actually, that one might have needed more setup. The doctor and his wife. I didn't actually pick up on that one. The seismographers with the girl as well. The
Yep.
college girl who's studying. Like, that was pretty cool as well. Even like the smallest things as well. Like I still remember this one line where it's Valentine's who's in the car and he's talking about his ideal girl. He's like, okay, I want her blonde hair, blue eyes. And like at the end of the movie where he realizes he likes the college girl because why not? That one I kind of rolled my eyes at it a little bit. I'm not gonna lie. It's like, oh yeah, of course you have to like put the two leading like male and female characters together. But like he does like go into his truck and take off all the pictures of like blonde and blue-eyed girls he has and throws them away, which is actually kind of cool. I'm not gonna lie.
It's
But
part of
yeah,
that character's transformation.
the physical representation of it. Side note, like real quick, I actually did like the way that this movie ended because like they never went like so grandiose with it because these two characters, Valentine and Earl, wanted to get out for their own like, oh, I want to get out and see the world and get a better life. When they do actually successfully kill off the alien, they're like their actual aspirations are like we can sell this for money and then find like a cool place to live. It's like that's their rise to fame,
Yeah.
and it almost
Yeah.
felt like I'm actually going to compare this movie to Of Mice and Men, where if the story of Mice and Men actually ended off on like a cooler, happier note and was also directed by Steven Spielberg with Aliens. But yeah,
Yeah, yeah. And like you called it a America movie, but it really is just like small town country guys. Like
yeah, that's
that's
why that's why it's so American. Because not
it,
only
you could have those types of guys in Canada too. It's like the country persona. They just really make you feel that in the movie, and they're fun characters to be around.
they were like all the characters that did survive. I will say I was not like sad that they all went away because they were generally so fun. Like legitimately, like, my favorite scene in this entire movie was the survivalist and literally Reba, the country singer,
Hmm.
just unloading loads of bullets onto this one sand creature that bursts through their underground survival bunker. That was
I
the most fun I had in that movie.
I think that must have been fun for the writer to set up these characters who are complete gun nuts. Like also, I guess something that fits with the whole America way you described it. But then not only does he just paint them as these complete gun nuts, they have a chance to use their gun knowledge and arsenal to the maximum extent.
Right.
They're like dreaming of an opportunity for this to actually put it all into use, and you get to see them do it.
And I was just so happy because, like, always in these films, like the gun nut survivalists are always the first one to die or just like straight up crazy. These guys really went at it, and also because the guy was genuinely brave. Like, he was honestly like super brave. I still remember that one scene at the ending where they're on the rocks and like the main cast get trapped in the dirt. He actually jumps on the dirt to like create more noise to distract it. He
Right.
wasn't crazy. He was genuinely
Yep.
quite a brave guy. Yeah, overall, like honestly, I loved the movie. Like, I kind of want to watch it again.
Awesome. Yeah. It's like I'm not a horror fan either, but there are certain movies that fall under that classification that that almost shouldn't be. This is kind of one of them.
Again, if a horror movie turns into action, I'm in. Like, I'm great. Like once the monster's revealed, I'm good.
And of course, a lot of people loved this one, and so, but it was still always kind of a sleeper hit and cult classic that it spawned probably like 5 or 6 or 7 sequels, but not anywhere near the quality of the first one.
There were sequels. I didn't
Yeah,
actually look that up. Did they ever explain the aliens in the sequel, or even if they were aliens? Because I think the movie literally ends with them saying like we're going to study these things to figure out what they are, but never explain what they were.
you will have to do some watching of the sequels to
Maybe
find
I
out.
will. Maybe I will.
They're
And
they're
also
not
like
they're rated not nearly as high as the first one.
I would think so, but did they at least bring back the original two guys for the sequels?
Maybe the first one.
Okay.
I think Michael Gross's character, the guy that you're talking about, the gun nut, he stars as the lead in at least one.
Oh.
I
Okay,
think.
that's weird. Well, you can't go wrong with sequels. Actually, on a small tangent, the sequels for Mulan, genuinely not bad.
Oh yeah.
Like they're
Oh,
like out of like all like directed Disney like DVD sequels, it's among the better ones. It's still not on par, but it's better than the rest.
yeah. Those were always hit and miss. The direct to video features from Disney, but there can be some good ones.
And I mean, we'll have to write a few of them.
That's right. There would be much rejoicing if we would sell one of those and they would get made.
Yeah. I don't want to like shoot my aspirations too high, but I kind of want to be known as a writer who can write good sequels. Because like they always like fall off. Like everyone has like a very like negative opinion of them. But like I just always see them as like just do the same movie but better. Like, you have like more build up, you have more setup, you have established
And
characters.
I mean, kind of the industry has taught us that it's really hard to make a good sequel, and yet they can be done. Like it's
Yeah.
when the few and far between times that it happens, and you just see that this sequel like even surpasses the first one. You just know that there's a way to do it, but
Hmm.
it's challenging, but it can be done.
I guess like in a final tangent to end off this podcast, I always thought like sequels and threequels are comparable to like chapters in a book. Or like not even chapters in the book, but like if you like read like the Nancy Drew series or like Sherlock Holmes where it's like individual stories and stuff like that, but with the same characters, it just like seems more sense. Like they should be just on par. Like they should be like connected together. They should be the same characters in different situations. Which is why I think the Knives Out series, I'd still call them sequels, but they honestly feel like individual movies that can be rated individually.
Yeah, I mean, when you're talking about a main character like Poirot movies or Sherlock Holmes, is it really a sequel or is it an episode? It
Yeah.
blurs the line there.
Yes, yeah. I think the one difference between like an episode and a sequel is the character that you end off at the first movie has to be the same character that begins the second movie, and you should still have character growth to take them in a different direction or further along their path.
Good way to put it.
But yeah, it just comes down to can you at least make the story that character story still relevant when I think the pitfall of sequels is you're just going to try a completely different idea and forget about the characters. We should honestly, right? For a future episode, we should watch sequels without watching the first movie to
That would be
see if
interesting.
like if they're better or worse. I don't know.
Well, we could do one on sequels. That would be
Yeah,
good.
that'd be good. All right.
But yeah, for my animation ranking, I'm still gonna give Mulan a four, solid four.
For me, I think I gave Tremors also a four as well. It was a really, really good, like almost B horror movie, but it generally kind of like exceeded it in my expectations.
Yeah, that's a cool thing about some movies. They you kind of come in with no expectations for it, and it's a movie that doesn't think highly of itself, but it brings something fulfilling at the end.
But yeah, keep surprising me because again, I watch so little live actions. I'll get that feeling of like fully surprised every single time I watch one of your things.
Well, I will do my best. But I think that brings us to the end of this episode. Thanks
Yeah,
for coming along, and I hope you enjoyed it. This is uh, Jay and Dave signing off.
yeah, and that's a wrap.
Special thanks to Niranj, who made the intro and outro music for this podcast. You can find him on Instagram at his handle at NiranjD. That is at NIRANJD on Instagram.